Okay, so good evening, everyone. Good day, good morning, good afternoon. Well, it's the final day of the Premier League season today. Man City are currently 3-0 up against Everton. Whole host of other scores as well coming in. Second halves have kicked off. We know who's getting relegated. We know who's won the league. It's all about the European places. So Liverpool, Chelsea, and Leicester are fighting out for the Champions League spaces, which is quite interesting. A lot going on in regards to some of these clubs as well. We know that Chelsea and Man City obviously have their Champions League final next weekend. We know Manchester United and Villarreal have their Europa League final on Wednesday. And so currently, Arsenal 2-0 up against Brighton. Villa are 2-0 up against Chelsea. That is a big scoreline if that stays that way. Newcastle beating Fulham. Leeds are beating West Brom. Leicester are 2-1 up against Tottenham. That is also a massive score in the Champions League race. Liverpool are 1-0 up against Crystal Palace. Roy Hodgson's last game. Of course, he's coached Liverpool before. That's an interesting send-off for Roy Hodgson. Man City 3-0 up against Everton. And Sheffield United are finishing bottom of the league but are winning 1-0 against Burnley. So as things currently stand in the Premier League, before we discuss other ongoing issues within sport, Man City will be top with 86 points as things currently stand. Man United will be second with 74 points. Liverpool will be third with 69, with Leicester tied with them with 69 points, but Liverpool are above Leicester on goal difference. However, if goal difference was tied, Leicester would be in third place by virtue of winning one extra game. That's the tiebreaker. Chelsea are currently slipping to fifth with 67 points. West Ham would be sixth with 65 points. Arsenal would leapfrog Tottenham as things stand with 61 points. Tottenham currently on 59 points, although they're above Leeds and Everton by virtue of better goal difference. 11th place will be Villa with 55, and then there's a clear gap between Villa and Wolves, who have got 45 points. They're equal with points with Newcastle, better goal difference again. Palace are currently 14th as things stand with 44 points. Point ahead Southampton in 15th with 43. Brighton have 41 points. Burnley would have 39 and would be 11 points clear of Fulham with 28. West Brom and Sheffield United. Now, what is interesting is Sheffield United have won more games than Fulham and West Brom, but by virtue of having less draws, that's the reason why they are where they are. If they drew more games than they lost, they might not have been in the bottom three. That's what's done for Sheffield United is the amount of defeats they've had this season. 29 defeats is pretty poor form. However, it's not the worst Premier League season in history. It's the fourth worst. So there are two seasons by Sunderland and, of course, Derby County's record-breaking season all those years ago. Am I watching any of the World Championship ice hockey? I've caught a few highlights. I mean, Great Britain today against Slovakia narrowly lost 2-1. If they won that game, that completely changes their group. They obviously took a beating by the Russians. They were blitzed in the first 10 minutes. That's what won the game there. I've picked up the odd result here or there, but I'm waiting more for the latter stages of the tournament. Obviously, the Stanley Cup playoffs are taking place. Some of the best players aren't available for their respective nations. And because it's a condensed season with the NHL and the KHL had to finish slightly earlier because of the pandemic, that's affected what players are available to play in this tournament. So not all the best players are available for the respective nations because of quarantine protocols and obviously with the regular season having some issues in North America with some of the Canadian teams only finishing literally just before the playoffs started in the North Division. I did see the Tavares injury. Perry, it's an unavoidable contact. He tried his best to get out of the way. The collision is sickening. The hit itself was clean. The collision with Perry's trying to hurdle him. Corey Perry obviously has a history of being a dirty player, being suspended and being an agitator. Corey Perry has no intent to injure Tavares in that position. That was an unavoidable contact. Thankfully, Tavares is out of hospital and recovering at home, minimum 2 weeks, but he has suffered a knee injury in that collision as well. But leaving on a stretcher, he wasn't in a good state when he left the ice. Concussion protocols will be in place, so 2 weeks at the earliest. However, delayed concussion can come along. So in the Tavares situation, 2 weeks is optimistic. I honestly believe. On the Jet side of things, yes, I'm as stunned as most Jets fans are. I wasn't expecting us to win 2 games on the road. We've obviously got 2 games at home. We could win the series in 4. McDavid hasn't got a single point so far. That is stunning to me. The fact that McDavid, Draisaitl, and Nugent Hopkins, their 3 best players, haven't got a single point is surprising to me. The way we finished the season, we were very, very lackadaisical in the last 2 weeks of the season. As a Jets fan, though, I mean, I'm wearing my Arizona game. I mean, they narrowly missed out the playoffs. But as a Jets fan, I am exceptionally happy with how things are going. But of course, there's no fans in attendance, and of course, the whiteout can have a positive impact, as we saw in 2018. It's the smallest arena, it's the most closely packed arena in a sense. Imagine having 15,500 people in there. But I think we're in a good, strong position to win the series. It'll be interesting to see what actually happens with McDavid, Draisaitl, and Nugent Hopkins. I mean, Nugent Hopkins has stuck at the Oilers for a very long time, and he's also a very good player. People go, McDavid's the best player in the league. It's all well and good winning individual accolades, but if you can't actually win conference titles, division titles, and Stanley Cups, then it counts for nothing. Your individual talents can take you so far, but it's a team sport, and unfortunately in Edmonton, they've only got a couple of players that carry the whole team, and their goaltendings are, well, Koskinen came to the league much later in his career from Europe, and goaltending's been an issue in Edmonton for 20 years. Edmonton has had an issue with underperforming for a very long time. If I can talk about the NRL, the last couple of weeks we've obviously had the foul play crackdown. It's not that they brought in new rules, it's that they're enforcing existing ones that they should have enforced for the previous 20 years. This is the NRL, and Peter V'landys being very reactionary to some really poor refereeing calls earlier in the season. Several players had some high-profile injuries. They brought in the 18th man rule. That has now actually been used this season, which was not expected. The last time a team before this season had used all 4 interchanges because of injury was, I think, 2018, 2017, so 3-4 years. And we've already seen the 18th man rule being used. And what we're seeing with the NRL and its crackdown on headshots, yes, player welfare is important, but the way I think the NRL going about it is not helping the brand of the NRL, and fans are switching off, and players are frustrated and voice their frustration, saying it's a contact sport. Head collisions are going to happen, injuries are going to happen, foul play is going to happen. Please punish the foul play. Yes, accidental or incidental contact is going to happen in a collision sport. There is nothing you can avoid. The Tavares injury, for example, in a different sport, it's an incidental contact. It was an unavoidable injury. Yes, the protocols were followed, and he's going to be out for the rest of the series. And if Toronto make it to the next round, he may play in the divisional finals series, most likely against the Jets at this point. But if the Maple Leafs don't make it out the first round, it doesn't matter if he's back or not. He's injured, which means he can't go to the World Championship latter stages if he was allowed to, because he's injured. What's more important, the NHL, the World Championships? I mean, as a European hockey fan, and with our own domestic leagues being so disrupted in the last 14, 15 months, and not a lot of these players have had a lot of game time as well, which is unfortunate. For me, I like watching the World Championships. It's a different style of hockey. You don't have the enforcer types and the fighting that you would have in regular league play, which is a shame, because that'd be kind of fun. It's a different set of rules, different ice surface, more skill-based. For me, I'm an NHL fan first. International ice hockey has a long way to go before it's on the rugby union, rugby league, and football levels, and cricket levels, where you have organised test series and organised like a World Cup kind of thing. The World Championships happen every year. It would be nice to see an ice hockey World Cup similar to rugby union, rugby league, and football and cricket, like every 4 years. It would be really nice to see that. The IIHF obviously has gone with the World Championship format, which I have no problem with. For me, it's a 50-50 split as a European hockey fan. As a North American hockey fan, I would say the NHL is more important. And then the World Championships is secondary, because you want to see the Stanley Cup. The Stanley Cup is awarded after the World Championships taken place, so not all the best players can be available for the World Championships. So you won't have a Sidney Crosby there, you won't have an Alex Ovechkin there, at least in the first group stages. But the World Championships is a great event. The problem is it's mostly hosted in Europe because of when the Stanley Cup is awarded. I don't think it ever been hosted in North America because of the Stanley Cup, which is I think what restricts the growth of the international game. If we were to have like a World Cup of ice hockey, a proper 4-year cycle with qualification and such like that, then maybe the international game outside of the Olympics and the current World Championships could grow. But because the Stanley Cup is awarded when it is, and because it is a winter sport, we are stuck with a World Championship format alongside the Stanley Cup and the Gagarin Cup in the KHL and the other domestic leagues trying to get done before the World Championships begin in May. And so therefore it's the timing of it, it's the sport. Yes and no, because the best players currently can't go to the Olympics because the NHL and the IOC are at loggerheads over, who pays for the player insurance, the player wages, the Olympic federations. So you get a lesser quality of player playing at the Olympics as things currently stand, with the IOC and the NHL not coming to an agreement over releasing players. The World Championships, you will see NHL quality players playing in the World Championships. Those teams in the normal year that have missed the playoffs or out in the first round, you will see some pretty high quality players representing their countries at the World Championships. The Olympics, there is an ongoing discussion with the Olympics in regards to participation of players. That's all part of the collective bargaining agreement. There's ongoing discussions with that as things currently stand. The players want to play. You have to qualify for the Olympics though, so a World Cup kind of thing, you would have a qualification process similar to the Olympics. If football and rugby union with the sevens and rugby league and cricket can have World Cups and qualification tournaments and qualification protocols, then ice hockey can do it. It's whether there's a willpower to do it. And the issue is ice hockey in Europe, the World Championships is their golden egg. The NHL obviously precludes the World Championships from ever being played in North America, and that I think in itself limits the growth of the international ice hockey kind of as a brand. It limits it. Whereas in the other professional sports where you have World Cups and World Tournaments, the domestic leagues seem to come together and work out their schedules so you can have the best players all available for their respective nations and a World Cup. I think the Olympics, you have to qualify though. The Olympic qualification, Great Britain missed out on that, but they qualify for the World Championships by virtue of going through the World Championship qualifying brackets. There's the top flight, second tier, third tier, fourth tier, and the rest is history. There's no relegation from the World Championships this year because the lower levels haven't been able to play because of the pandemic. So next year we'll be there again. All these teams that are playing in the World Championships this year will be there again. This will be our third consecutive tournament, which we haven't done since the early 90s. So British ice hockey is getting a lot of exposure right now, and some of the players are playing very, very well. In the game against Slovakia, the scoreline would suggest that we compete against an established regional power. But it would be nice to see a World Cup of ice hockey in a similar format to what we have with football and rugby union, rugby league. I would love to see that. I just don't think it's going to happen with the NHL, with the Stanley Cup awarded. And when would you play it? Would you play it in pre-season? Would you play it in the off season? It would be interesting to see what they come up with. Well, no, GB are not lucky to be there. We beat the French in the last tournament, which meant we qualified for what would have been last year's tournament. The French should have played better, plain and simple. That's my opinion on that. I'm not holding any punches. The last tournament, we were better than the French, and the French were rightly relegated to the level below. It's how the IIHF system works. I do feel sorry for those nations in the tiers below who don't have a tournament this year to obviously grow the game and get their players some game time. But I think some of these players who would have been playing in the second Group B, as they call it, probably thankful that they've had a condensed season, if they've had a season at all, and they can have some time to rest and recuperate and then focus on hopefully, fingers crossed, a full schedule next year of regular season play and international play. I think that's what a lot of the players would and coaches would be thankful they actually have this year off. Players can recover from injuries. Players can, get back to fitness, rest up. And teams like Kazakhstan are in there who may not have stayed up either. So it's good having like some consistency, and it gives these British players for the development of the game in this country. We've got so many issues with teams struggling for arenas and teams going out of business. Exposure, and we want to keep growing the game, and the game has grown massively in the last decade. And part of that is to do with the national side having such success in their various levels that they played at. And two back-to-back promotions would say that the team is definitely growing, and the sport was growing up until COVID. So yes, Free Sports is showing the coverage. If you have a VPN, you can watch their games live on YouTube. I don't have a VPN, so I can only catch the highlights, but they are getting international coverage. They are getting there is a good TV deal with the IIHF, so it makes them a lot of money. And there's some good sponsorship as well. And it is a good bit of exposure because there will be NHL scouts scouting some of these European teams. There will be other European leagues scouting these players. Ben Bauman's got a contract in Austria from his performance at the last World Championships in 2019. He faced the most shots and made the most saves. So he got a good contract. Admittedly, a knee injury did curtail his time in Austria, but he got some exposure. Ben O'Connor went to Sweden for a bit in the KHL. Obviously, Liam Kirk got drafted that year. And he's having a very good tournament so far. So obviously, his development in the OHL Canada has been quite good. Yeah, the BBC coverage on ice hockey is just appalling, absolutely appalling. Could do a lot better. We have an international team playing in an international tournament on a world audience, and it's the 25th article on the opening page of the BBC Sport website is how we are progressing in the tournament. That is not good enough. You say you're a British broadcasting corporation, that's and a British team is playing in an international tournament at the top level and is getting a couple of paragraphs. That is not good enough. Not good enough for the fastest growing sport in the UK. That is really poor. There's no other way to say it really. Media coverage in this country has been poor for a very long time. It's more up to the local media and freelance journalists to cover it. And had we beaten Slovakia, that would have made reasonable news over here. Probably bigger news in Slovakia that they would have lost to a lower ranked team. That would have been national disaster in Slovakia. But no, the coverage is not as good as it should be. And it's a shame the World Championships is slightly overshadowed by the build up to the Euros as well. That's something else that will be distracting people is the European delayed Euros will be overshadowing the World Championship of Ice Hockey, which is a shame because I think ice hockey is, for me, the more entertaining sport. But it is what it is. But yeah, the BBC should be doing more coverage. Their coverage is, well, next to nothing. Free Sports have all the rights in the UK anyway. But that's to do with the contract signed with the federation about who's going to host the coverage. The TV rights being put to tender by the IIHF, who wants to bid and what money. And the British media believe there isn't a market for the sport, which I think is wrong. I think from what I've seen when I've been going to games, they don't. Well, yeah, the Lions is on Sky, right? It's on a pay-per-view broadcast. The Free Sports, thankfully, is free to wear if you have a free sat dish or the right free preview box. Spurs have equalised against Leicester, so that's interesting. So it's getting really interesting now. Leicester 2, Tottenham 2, Liverpool 2 up against Palace. These Man City put 5 past Everton. Let's have a look. British ice hockey, where is it? Yeah, it's oh wow, I'm really trying to read through, and it's there's nothing on the World Championship of Ice Hockey at all on the BBC Sport main page. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. That is ridiculous. Yep. Nothing. That is utterly ridiculous. That yes, we played our game for the day, but um, yeah, I mean, look, Free Sports and Premier Sports have the broadcasting rights there. They obviously the broadcaster that's tendered a bid with the IIHF and the various leagues that they cover. They've put in a bid, and that bid's been accepted by the various leagues and the IIHF. And that's those leagues' prerogative to sell the rights, and obviously the BBC weren't interested. Um, and this is what frustrates people with media rights deals. This is why people find illegal streams. This is why people change their VPN to watch a live stream on YouTube, because the IIHF World Championships is free to watch on YouTube. Apart from GeoBlock, which I find the GeoBlock frustrating, but that's part of the TV rights deal. And it is what it is. I mean, I have seen obviously a lot of it advertised on Facebook and Twitter, but that's because of my preferences and what I follow. Regularly comes up in my news feed. There is a market for ice hockey here. I mean, the Boston Bruins didn't come here to Belfast in I think 2007 for a pre-season game against the Belfast Giants for no reason. They realised there is a passionate fan base for the sport in the UK. Otherwise, the NHL wouldn't have done that. And the NHL regularly goes to various European countries to play games. So the fact I can see the NHL doing another pre-season or a regular season doubleheader at some point in the UK, because we have got some of the arenas that are smaller than NHL arenas, but there is a passionate fan base. Nottingham or Sheffield or Belfast would happily host an NHL team again in a pre-season warm-up game. I mean, they've taken pre-season warm-up games to Sweden and Switzerland and the Czech Republic and Finland. They've taken games and they have sold out arenas. And when I go to games in this country, I've seen jerseys of every NHL, AHL, ECHL. I've seen jerseys from European leagues. I've seen jerseys from international teams. There is a passionate fan base in this country that is an underappreciated fan base in this country. But it is what it is at the end of the day. Obviously, the BBC weren't interested in bidding for the rights to the tournament, and Free Sports, Premier Sports were. And I can't fault their coverage. I really can't. And they were willing to put a bid in, and they got accepted for their rights deal, however long that lasts. So, it is what it is. It's the same with, let's say, the Super League, Rugby League. Really poor TV rights deal. Concerns about the viability of the league as it currently is, possibly shrinking it down, which is not good, with the Rugby League World Cup coming at the end of the season. Some sports have got a raw deal when it comes to media rights. Other sports have done very, very well. So depending on how Great Britain do, and if I think we can do okay in this tournament, it helps grow the game. And unfortunately, the powers that be don't see a market there when there is. I know plenty of British ice hockey fans and YouTubers, and I'm surprised that things like the broadcasters like the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5, so your main free-to-air broadcast groups, and Sky and others haven't taken that risk. But considering how the broadcasters handled the pandemic and handled the TV rights issues with the various sports, it highlighted a lot of issues within the professional sports landscape that have been allowed to fester for a very long time. And, BT Sport losing all FA Cup coverage from next season is I think, fan pressure and viewership figures have forced the FA's hand to look at, well, the free-to-air coverage seems to get more viewers we'll have shared on BBC ITV. Same with the Euros. Same with the Six Nations. They're back in talks to keep it on free-to-air TV. Again, I think fan pressure and viewership figures have forced their hand. I mean, there was talk of CVC Investment Capital buying a bigger stake in the Six Nations, and the response on social media was not positive towards that move, and there was, the possibility of it going behind a paywall, and the pushback over the last 12 to 16 months on that issue has grown in intensity. What we've seen with the pandemic with football and the European Super League plans, the pushback was there, and that's still an unresolved issue. I mean, having a discussion with my neighbour literally before I came on live stream about what's happening with this European Super League. It's gone very quiet. The three clubs that remain, Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Juventus, haven't officially withdrawn from this project, even though Agnelli, the chairman of Juventus, has basically said it's not going to work. Is very, very interesting, and the fan pushback across not just Europe but North America. This is key because there's a lot of American involvement in this European Super League plan. Is very striking. What I saw on social media wasn't just European fans showing anger and discontent at the clubs and the way football is run, but the Americans, who are a crucial market for European TV rights when it comes to European leagues, going, actually, we like how the European sports conduct themselves with promotion, relegation, and the community club dynamic, where we have a franchise system which doesn't necessarily link itself to the city or the location that it's in. They were very much against the direction of this European Super League, and that's another thing. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with Juventus. Are they going to be allowed to play in Serie A next season? Real Madrid and Barcelona, will they be expelled from European football next season? That's the threat that UEFA have put down, and they haven't officially withdrawn their proposal. And it is what it is. There's a lot to discuss in that regard. I mean, there's other things going on as well in football. I mean, the Harry Kane situation is now reported that he has handed a transfer request in to the club board saying he wants to leave. And that could in itself be very, very interesting what Tottenham do. If he's officially handed a transfer request in, that means the power is now in his hands. It's a shift of power. Before a transfer request is handed in, Daniel Levy has all the power in those negotiations. Now a transfer request is in. They may have to take any offer that is tabled for him. If clubs go, well, that's a bit steep, and pull out, they may be forced to take any offer, because if he refuses to play, Spurs have taken the lead against Leicester, which has changed things. I don't think it's enough for Tottenham to get European football. No, it's not enough for Tottenham to get European football. They still miss out. The big move is Liverpool currently sit third, Chelsea fourth, Leicester fifth. Tottenham are above Arsenal by a point. I don't know if bragging rights is going to cover it for Spurs fans, because Spurs is a very interesting situation. They sign up for the European Super League. Their star players handed in a transfer request to the club. Allegedly. There's been speculation about Harry Kane's position at Spurs for 3 years. There's no permanent manager in place. Club's heavily indebted with the stadium. No trophies, again. And now the whole Harry Kane thing has been building in intensity over recent days. And it's going to be interesting, because if the club reject his transfer request, that actually poses a bigger problem, because there's a thing called a Bosman ruling. Yes, the dreaded Bosman rule. I've been discussing this with my neighbour, and my neighbour Adam goes, no, don't mention it. It's not going to happen. But actually, in theory, it could. If Harry Kane really wants to force through a transfer move, and a club does table an offer, and let's say Tottenham reject his transfer request, then a Bosman ruling could be the only option, at which point that means a lot of litigation in court, and a messy, drawn-out, protracted negotiation. Bosman ruling is something that clubs and players and agents want to avoid at all costs. Tottenham have to deal with Harry Kane very carefully, because they could get a lot of money for him, Not that it's justifiable, the transfer fees that will be requested, but they could get a lot of money for them. Or here could be forced to take a reduced offer of him, or they could be forced to let him go on a free. So the Harry Kane situation is exceptionally interesting. Exceptionally interesting. And then whether he wants to force through a move via a Bosman ruling or via an official transfer request. It's Daniel Levy obviously released a statement saying we got things wrong. And they did. They didn't win silverware with the group of players they had when they were peaking. They came up short between 2016 and 2018. That was their peak years for me. And I think they've missed their window. And we could see a mass player exodus from Spurs in the summer. Really could. I've also been looking at the Euro 2020, Euro 2021 venues. 11 separate cities in 11 separate countries. That's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Euros, with what's going on with the pandemic in Europe as well as over here, and a lot of travel. UEFA said UEFA said they're never going to do a pan-European tournament ever again. They said that's never going to happen again. But it's going to be interesting to see how certain teams deal with the logistics of all that travel. We're playing as far away as Baku and St. Petersburg to Seville and London and Hampden Park in Glasgow. There's 11 cities. Obviously, Brussels were withdrawn quite early on because they were failing to meet targets on their stadium rebuild. Dublin, obviously, in April, withdrew. Bilbao's games have been moved to Seville. So there's been a lot of logistical changes when it comes to the Euros. They start on the 11th, so not long, just under 3 weeks until the start of the tournament. It's going to be interesting to see if the tournament can go ahead in full, if the pandemic affects it. What countries are allowing fans in attendance. The quarantine and quarantine protocols, and it's going to be interesting. Other news as well. Spurs still haven't got a full-time manager. Obviously, Roy Hodgson's last game in charge of Palace today, and Nuno's last game in charge of Wolves, which means 3 clubs are going to be looking for managers in the Premier League next season. There's rumours about Arteta possibly not being at Arsenal next season. A lot of issues there with managerial vacancies. Frank Lampard looks a favourite to go to Palace, although I think Wolves might suit him better as a style of play. But looks like Frank Lampard could be going to Palace. Tottenham. This is the situation with Tottenham. No full-time manager. Star player wants to leave. No trophies again. Heavily in debt. Tottenham could be in serious trouble next season. If Harry Kane does leave, I can see the players going with him. What is the Blackburn-Burnley? Oh, God, it's one of the oldest rivalries in English football. It's one of the most heated rivalries in English football. The problem is we haven't had competitive matches against each other for quite some time because we're in different leagues at the moment, which I think is a shame. But the rivalry is one of the most intense rivalries I've ever seen. Absolutely, like, hatred is a polite way of describing the rivalry between Rovers and Burnley. It is hatred. There's no other two ways about it. This rivalry goes back to the foundation of the Football League, so a very long time. Absolute hatred. I think the 2000-2001 season was the peak of the hatred. Real hatred. If Kane and Son leave and don't get good replacements, they could be near the bottom of the field. I think they could be struggling as soon as next season. The depth the club has, no European football. They might be beating Leicester today, but they're outside the European places. If it is confirmed that Harry Kane has officially handed in a transfer request, and that was being rumoured for about a week or so, that gets interesting how Tottenham deal with it. But Son has signed a contract extension. Harry Kane's got another 3 years, I believe, on his contract. He signed his contract, a lengthy contract in 2018. It's now 2021, so that's 3 years into a 6-7 year deal. This is the problem with signing long-term contracts with players. I don't know exactly what his buyout clause is. Tottenham are looking at anywhere between 100 and 150 million pounds for an injury-prone player in his late 20s. But if Kane leaves, I can see other players going with him. I can see a mass player exodus. The club obviously is heavily in debt. Now, the NFL is planning to come back in October for 2 games, which should alleviate some of the financial woes that Spurs have. But they haven't got their stadium, which hasn't got naming rights yet. No main title sponsors come in for the stadium. The stadium was over budget and late anyway. They had to obviously rent Wembley for a period, which they had to pay the FA money. No silverware. I can see a player exodus this summer. If it doesn't happen, then I can't see how much longer Tottenham can go on where they are not being good enough. They haven't been good enough this season. They might be beating Leicester right now, but they haven't been good enough this season. They came up short in 2016 and 2017 and 2018. They got that Champions League final and just didn't play. And if Liverpool turned up, they could have had 6 or 7 put past them. They get to the League Cup final and sack Mourinho days before the final, which made no logical sense because Mourinho is the only manager to beat Guardiola in the cup final. It made no logical sense to me why they did that. The rumour being that Mourinho had protested against the European Super League proposals by refusing to take training with the players. But I think there's bigger problems at play with Spurs more than just the Mourinho situation or Pochettino, how they handled Tim Sherwood. They oh God. I think I think Eriksen and Trippier, I mean, you look at the players who won trophies since leaving Spurs, and that's what's really interesting. Obviously, Defoe won a trophy with Rangers, with the league in Scotland, and then Trippier wins with Atletico yesterday, and of course Eriksen won with Inter. That's 3 more players that have won silverware since leaving Tottenham. I think it's 88 players have now won silverware since 2008, since leaving Tottenham. That's like 7 starting lineups with subs have won silverware since leaving Tottenham in the last 13 years. That it's nearly, I think it's either 88 or 90 players have won silverware since leaving Spurs. Since 2008 when they last won the League Cup. That is a telling stat, really. It doesn't matter what club they go to. It doesn't matter if they go to a lesser league, so to speak, because some European fans, some fans go, oh, it's only this league or that league. It's only like the Scottish league or the Danish league or the Swiss league or whatever it is. They're still going away and having success at a different club or in a different country. It doesn't matter if it's in the English system or in the Scottish system or one of the European leagues. They're going elsewhere and they're winning. And that in itself is damning. I think, seeing fellow England teammates that Harry Kane has played with in Trippier and Kyle Walker, going on to win silverware in whatever league they're playing in, has got to be frustrating if you're sticking it out. It has to be frustrating. Modric, going to Spain with Bale, wins a lot of silverware. Modric has decided to stay in Spain. Bale's obviously come back, admittedly on loan. Eriksen going to Inter, Kyle Walker going to Man City. You've got, Trippier obviously winning with Atletico. It then raises a point about the culture at the club. And I'm not a Spurs fan. I've got friends who are, but I'm not a Spurs fan. At the end of the day, like the fact that I think it is 88 players have gone on to win silverware at other clubs since 2008 says to me that there is a culture issue there, that they're not happy, they're not feeling that the club is developing and progressing, and they have gone on and gone, you know what, I see a better opportunity to either A, play more regular first team football, B, develop my game, be it for, personal development. Right, final scores have come in. Arsenal beating Brighton 2-0. Villa 2-1 against Chelsea. Fulham have lost 2-0 to Newcastle. Leeds beat West Brom 3-1. Leicester lost 4-2 to Tottenham, but it wasn't enough for Tottenham to get European football. Liverpool beat Palace 2-0. Man City put 5 past Everton, and Sheffield United beat Burnley 1-0. So on the final table, we'll just grab a team. We'll go Arsenal Brighton because it's alphabetical. Where's the league table? So Man City finished first with 86 points. Man United second with 74. Liverpool third. That is a massive turnaround from where they were earlier in the season, 69. Chelsea 1 point above Leicester with 67. Leicester finished fifth with 66, but they qualified for Europe by virtue of winning the FA Cup. So it doesn't really matter where they finished in the league. West Ham finished a point below them in sixth with 65. Tottenham finished seventh, 1 point above Arsenal in eighth. Is the Invincibles Arsenal team the best team in Premier League? I would think the back-to-back Man City titles with the points that they acquired, admittedly not going undefeated the whole season, I think would equal them. Maybe Liverpool. The two Man City title wins back-to-back and Liverpool's title win last season would probably equal the Invincibles. But I would have to have a look at all Premier League winning seasons and the points for the winning team. Bearing in mind, until 96, you played more games because you had a bigger league. The league shrank to 20 teams in the late 90s. So looking at some of the seasons in the early Premier League era from 92 to 96, more teams were playing in the league at the time. So then you would have to adjust that for points per game. It basically was harder to win the Premier League in the early 90s. Admittedly, English teams were still barred from Champions League and what is now the Europa League and Cup Winners' Cup competitions because of the European ban, I think, until 1995. So you have to factor that in. But was it 94? It was definitely a 5-year European ban we had, so that affected the amount of games teams had to play. I think that Invincibles Arsenal's team is up there. The fact they went the whole league season unbeaten, you could argue that hasn't been done since. Other teams have tried, in Man City and Liverpool in recent seasons. But at the end of the day, it's hard to compare that one. In my opinion, it is very hard to compare that one. Out of all the Premier League winning teams, 6 of them are still in the Premier League, 1's in the Championship. So, of all the teams to win the Premier League, they're in the top 2 flights in English football. 26-man squad for the Euros. We've still got 2 European Cup finals to play with 3 English teams out of the 4 teams involved. Injuries can happen, suspensions can happen, so anything can happen in the next week. And players can go injured in there could be injuries today that get reported. And obviously we've got, playoffs as well. So some of the nations in the Euros will be selecting teams from the Championship and League One, ironically, to represent their countries for their squads. So injuries can happen. There's still games left to play. Until the Champions League final whistle has been blown, we won't know on suspensions and injuries with players. We know that Nick Pope has got to have surgery before the Euros, and he's part of Southgate's plans. So anything can happen between now and the 11th of June. I don't know when the squads are finally announced, but we have a very short turnaround between the end of the European club season and the Euros. We only have a 2-week gap to get players in camp. There's no pre-Euro friendlies this time. Normally, we'd have a few warm-up friendlies before the tournament. We don't have that luxury this year. So there's only a 2-week gap in which to get players into camp, get training, go into the protocols, get training, go to your training camp base, and then play games. So very short turnaround with no warm-up games. So there could be a chance of some very fatigued players at this tournament and some very, very high-scoring games. 25th. So that's 2 days. But in that, I think, is a bit premature. I think you want to wait till the end of the Champions League final because there are English players available that he would want to select. You've got to play in 2 cup finals, and 3 of the teams involved are English. So Man United, you've got Luke Shaw in there. You've got Rashford, Greenwood. Man City have got Foden, Kyle Walker. You've got, with Chelsea, you've got Hudson-Odoi, for example. They could go down injured in these games. Mason, Chilwell. There are players that he may name in the squad on Tuesday, who by Wednesday or Saturday have got a broken leg, or pulled a hamstring, or have torn a groin, or been suspended for foul play, and that in itself is the problem with having such a short turnaround between the Champions League final whistle and the tournament itself starting on the 11th. It's a very, very, very short turnaround. We'll have to see what squad actually fully gets announced. We know Nick Pope, goalkeeper's having surgery. Whether he's fully fit in time to take part in training and warm up is going to be interesting. I mean, we know that the short turnaround is going to mean there's a lot of players who are fatigued. And fatigue leads to mistakes, and mistakes leads to entertainment. Now, a lot of people go, you want to have a perfection. What I like seeing is very open games with a lot of mistakes, a lot of open play, and end-to-end expansive play. And that's what fatigue brings. The issue is fatigue also brings injuries. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what the final squad looks like. We'll see who he names, who's on the plane. We'll see who goes into camp. There can also be emergency call-ups as well before the tournament. There'll be reserves as well. It will be interesting to see the makeup of his squad and the age of it. I think the average age is going to be very, very young, and it's going to be a similarly inexperienced squad that goes to the Euros that went to the World Cup, which may work to our advantage. It may not. I think one advantage we have is there are several English players who are eligible for selection who are playing overseas where the leagues have already finished. So you've got Sancho and playing at Dortmund, for example. The German league's been done now for a week or so. He'll be fresher than, let's say, Chilwell or Foden. He'll be playing Champions League final. So that could work in our benefit, having some English players not playing either at top clubs who are playing European finals or playing on the continent, and that could work to our advantage. But I think that we are too young a squad. There's not enough senior players in there who are around 30, 31, 32. There's not enough senior veteran players to be part of that squad, just to guide the young players through. I think that's a weakness, which was highlighted in the semi-final against Croatia in the World Cup. Not enough senior players there, and I think that's a weakness with Southgate's selections over his time as England manager. He's going solidly with youth as his core, rather than having an experienced core with a lot of youth players around that who feed off having that experience around them. That I think is a fundamental flaw with Southgate's selections since he's been manager. He goes too young with his squad average age. That's my personal theory. Is we are going to go in with a very young, inexperienced squad, and we're going to get blown out in games or not perform. Or the opposite could happen. We could actually do really, really well and get through with flying colours. But we had the same concerns, before the World Cup. We made the semi-final, and we didn't play well at that World Cup. We didn't play free-flowing counter-attack football. We played very stodgy, slow-paced possession football that was easy to break down, and hence why the Croatia result was what the Croatia result was, which we lost because we didn't play to our strengths, which is speed and counter-attack. But we'll see what the squad's named, and we'll see who's going to be going, and we'll see. But I expect there to be a sort of policy that if you're going to go transfer stuff, contract discussions, leave that till before or after the tournament. Nothing happens mid-tournament. Several other nations have done that before, where they've said if you're going to be on the transfer market or contract extensions, you keep your contract negotiations and your transfers before the tournament or after the tournament. I think that's a rule I think most nations should stick by. Yeah, I think the squad's too young. That he's named in recent internationals. I've watched some of our play. It's been really diabolical. I switched off both our World Cup qualifiers against Albania and Poland. I couldn't watch the full games. They were so poor. They were plodding, methodical, slow-paced. Not enough crosses in the box, not enough movement in the box. Players not making enough runs. Accuracy of shooting as well. And when you're playing that, we're not suited to slow build-up play. We are suited to quick, fast-paced counter-attacks, which is another reason why I'm surprised with Southgate's decision not to keep Vardy around and Vardy going, I'm going to retire, which I think is a mistake. I generally think that is a mistake on Southgate's part, is going, because of your age, because you're the wrong side of 30, or you're over 30, I don't really have you in my plans. I'm sorry, we don't have enough experienced, level-headed professionals. When I say level-headed, Kyle Walker is an experienced player, but I wouldn't call him a level-headed senior figure in that squad. Because of some of his antics off the field, he's not a model professional. And that's what worries me, is the squad is very, very young. And some of the more senior players have battled with injury this season or a lack of form this season. I think Henderson should be captain because he's just an engine in midfield. He's not the most skillful, he's not the most flamboyant, but he's got the work rate and the energy levels. And he's a known leader, but he's missed huge chunks of the season with Liverpool this season. Harry Kane's clearly unsettled at Tottenham. Trippier's had his issues with the FA, and yes, he has won La Liga with Atletico, and that's key to have a winner in the team who knows what it's like to win a very difficult league to win, because it's normally Real and Barcelona duking it out. And it's only the second time in 7 years that Atletico have managed to get that La Liga title. But you need experienced players. But some of these experienced players have had some off-field dramas, and some of these young players have had off-field dramas this last 14, 15 months during the pandemic. So I have my concerns. I really do. But we'll have to see what happens. In my opinion, we have to see what happens. I'm not getting ahead of myself at all. It is worrying that all but a handful of players in form are young, and he has to pick on form, not on reputation or the club that they play for. That's my personal opinion. A lot of players have missed out in the past because they play for an unfashionable, smaller Premier League club, or they play for a club that isn't one of the big six, which I think is a flawed selection policy, but that's been a selection policy for a long time. Apart from the goalkeeping position, that's interesting. I think Henderson of Man United might get the shout on the gloves. I think he's earned the right to be number one over Pickford. Pickford is mistake prone for me, and he's just shipped 5 goals today for Everton against Man City. So and he'll be playing against some of these Man City players in the Euros. So that's something to keep note of. I'm not sold on Pickford as our number one. Nick Pope is injured, having surgery. Henderson would be my logical bet for the gloves. Heaton would be my backup. But that's my personal opinion. Southgate's obviously his favourites, and that I think could be a problem. But we'll have to see what squad he announced, what the announced squad is. But as I say, players can still get injured. There's still 2 games for English clubs to play this season. 2 European Cup finals. There could be injuries. So, what right backs will I take? That is where I think we have a problem. I'm not sold on Kyle Walker. Really not sold on Kyle Walker. Never have been. Yes, he's a senior player, but his off-field issues, and he's not the best right back, personally. But I haven't seen enough. Really, I haven't watched enough FA Cup games and such to. I'm caught up Premier League games to really make an opinion on who the best English right back is. But I wouldn't say Kyle Walker. But that's my personal opinion. Even though he's just won the league and he's playing a Champions League final next weekend, I don't think he's the best right back we've got in this country right now. I think Trippier's better with a dead ball. He's a dead ball specialist. Ward-Prowse should be in the squad for his set play nous. He's a very good free kick taker as well from the set play. But he plays for Southampton, an unfashionable club. So Trent Alexander-Arnold's been injured a lot. He's obviously not fully fit. He's not played a lot of games this season. I would have Trippier as the starting right back. I would have Ward-Prowse in the midfield as well. That adds a little something. But I don't really know. I mean, I'm not sold that we've got enough senior players to guide this young squad around, and that's the fear I have. Is we're too young a team, too many young players, too much inexperience, and young players make mistakes. Not because they're not fit, because they're young and developing their game. And that's one thing you don't want. You want players to perform well in pressure situations on a global stage. And that's what happened in the World Cup. We crumbled against Croatia. We limped through the knockout stages. Yes, we won a penalty shootout for the first time since 1996. But we came up short in the big crunch game to get to the final. We didn't play particularly well. Even against Panama, it was mostly on set plays that we managed to get any reward for our efforts. Very few, only 1 goal scored outside the box. I think only 3 goals scored that weren't set plays. Heavily reliant on penalties and free kicks, and corners. That's no way to win a tournament. It's no way to win a tournament. You have to have the ability to score from open play inside and outside the box. You have to. And other teams are far better at doing that than we are. Just look at the French in 2018. They scored a lot of goals from open play. Then they weren't. That wasn't even the best French side on paper. Yeah, 20 years ago, a senior player would be, late 20s, early 30s would be your captain and your leadership core. Maybe 4 or 5 in the squad. A senior goalkeeper. He may not be the starter, but he's there. A senior centre back, maybe a senior centre back pairing, and maybe a senior striker and a senior midfielder, just to glue the spine together. Now it's a lot younger. I mean, 25, 28 is not bad because some of these guys have played a lot of international club football by this stage. And professional sport is getting younger when it comes to top flight professional sport. It's, rugby union, rugby league, football, they're all speeding up. Look at the NHL, the average age is dropped. There's more players under 25 than over 25 playing in the NHL now. So yes, the average age is getting younger for top flight for a professional sport because the speed of play has increased. But on that note, that's at club level. You look at international level, you still need. You look at the teams that win; they had a good core of players around the age of 30, and the average age was over 26, 27. You want to have your average squad age about 27. That's when a lot of players peak. The fact that if we do well at this tournament with a young squad, they haven't peaked yet. That is the key. Goalkeepers tend to get better with age. They tend to peak later in their careers. Centre backs tend to peak in their about 30. Midfielders tend to peak at about 28. And strikers, with the pace they have, tend to peak about 25, 26. So you want your average squad age to be around 27, 28. And England's squad at the last World Cup was the youngest squad we've ever taken to an international tournament. In regards to what is classed as a senior player, I would say a player who's had 35 to 50 caps, I would say is part of my leadership group. You're going to have some debutants in every squad. There's going to be a guy who may not have had a cap yet. You're going to have some players who are only got a handful of appearances, but you want to have your core players around 30 to 70 appearances. There may be others who may have got 100 in there. I don't think we're going to have any English players with 100 caps going because that golden generation has all retired now. But you do want to have a senior group whose average age is around 27 to 32. We don't have that. In all honesty, we don't have that senior core of players who've been there several tournaments, played the professional game for a good decade. We don't have enough of them. And that's why I think we have a weakness. At the same time, that could be a strength, that youthful exuberance and that lack of fear. That could be a strength of ours, but we have to play to the strength, which is pace and counter-attack. And unfortunately, I don't think we have the defence to do that. I don't think we have the quality defenders and quality defensive midfielders to do that counter-attack style. We just do not have enough senior players of a quality that we had 20 years ago. But that's just my observation of professional football. The same can be said in rugby union. The same can be said in rugby league. The same can be said in ice hockey. You need that senior core of players who've been around the block, who've been in the game for 10, 15 years at the top level, just to guide some of these new guys around, or these lesser experienced players around the field. Again, tournament experience counts for a lot. Obviously, this tournament's been delayed by a year. There isn't many, but bearing in mind, under Roy Hodgson, when he inherited the job, he was meant to be an interim. So he inherited a mess. He did the best he could with what he had, and it wasn't Roy Hodgson's fault where we were in 2012, 2014, and 2016. And a lot of those players obviously had failed at major tournaments. So there was a big wave of clear-outs of players. And there was a renewal under Southgate, which obviously means they've only had one tournament as a group. Some have had a couple, but there's not many from 2016 and 2014 left floating around. But I think the next World Cup could be when, next year when this group of players peaks, because they would have had a couple of tournaments together. I think next year could be better for them. But at the same time, with mid-World Cup cycle, delayed tournament has allowed some of these players to get an extra year of league play and internationals under their belt when obviously play resumed and internationals resumed. So they've got that little bit of extra experience they wouldn't have had if the tournament was last year. But again, it's an interesting point that there is not a lot of tournament experience with a lot of these players, and that is a concern for me. that this may be a tournament too soon. But we had the good foundation in 2018. Let's not lose that foundation and what we learned in 2018 and our player development since then. There's a lot of new players that have come onto the international scene since then, and some players who've moved on and have announced their international retirement or not been selected since then for a variety of reasons. It'll be interesting to see how it all pans out. It'll be interesting to see who gets selected. International select. There's going to be some good players that miss out. I would hope he selects on form and ability rather than what players have done previously. So Trippier should be in the squad for me. Ward-Prowse should be in the squad for me. Henderson at Man United in goal, based on last year and this year's performances, should go for me. He should be in the squad. Pickford, I'm not sold on Pickford. I never have been. And for some reason, Southgate keeps putting him in there. He has some tournament experience, but he's only got one tournament, so it does get interesting. There are some senior players who are still putting their hand up, saying that if need be, I will go. And Southgate's going this youth first policy, which, while is admirable, he has to play to these players' strengths, which is fast-paced counter-attacking football. It's where we look most fluid, and most threatening. And what I saw against Poland and Albania was not enjoyable to watch. It really wasn't striking fear into the opposition. It wasn't the best performance we could put out there. And we are going to have to play against a very good Croatia side that have got our number in recent years. We're going to be playing against Scotland, who'll be motivated, their first tournament since 1998. They're going to be up for it, motivated, in the old enemy. We've got the Czech Republic in there as well, who should not be underestimated, even though we've got a good recent record against the Czechs in the last, I think, 4 or 5 years. We've really hammered them. But out of that, the Scotland game is going to be really difficult. The Croats have got our number and have done for years. And the Czechs, while we have easily, powered past them, and they're not the Czech teams of the 90s. I don't know. I'm not sold on Stones and Maguire. Maguire's obviously injured at the moment. I think Maguire isn't that bad. I think he's at the wrong club. I think he should have stayed at Leicester. In my personal opinion, I think the price tag has weighed him down a little bit. What Man United paid for him. He's not a bad defender, but I think when he went to United, there was obviously issues in the dressing room. There was confidence issues around the whole squad. Because it's a club with a bigger profile, there's a lot more media interest and speculation about how things are going, and every mistake is ripped to pieces. Whereas if he stayed at Leicester, he's a bit more under the radar when it comes to the media, a bit more under the radar when it comes into a bad performance. But Solskjaer, I think, is a good manager. I think he's a man manager. I think he knows how to deal with players with confidence issues. Whereas under Mourinho, that wasn't the case. Mourinho obviously is a very prickly character, very difficult to work with. Whereas I think with Solskjaer, he's improved Maguire's confidence, which I think took a hit. I think Maguire's confidence did wobble in the last 3 years, and Solskjaer is bringing some of that confidence back. But Man United have had a lot of issues off the field with the whole Ed Woodward situation and the ownership, and obviously a lot of distractions there. I think Maguire is a good defender. I think his confidence has been rocked since he's at Man United. And he'll be looking at what Leicester have done this season with the FA Cup and gone, I may not win silverware this season, even though he isn't going to be part of the squad that's in a European Cup final. And he may be looking at that going, look at the positivity around my former club. I mean, there seems to be a lot of unity there, a lot of players reading off the same page, a lot of positivity with United. Okay, recently that positivity has returned, but there's a lot more expectation at that point. There's a hell of a lot more expectation and a lot more pressure and media spotlight. and he did have a big price tag against, like, weighing around his neck. So we'll see how he does. I think he's much maligned unfairly. I'm not sold on some of his centre back partners around him, but he has got Luke Shaw most likely going as the left back, so that will help with the left-hand side of England's defence. It's the right-hand side of England's defence, even though they're most likely going to be Kyle Walker and John Stones, two Man City players. So they could have a good combination. I'm not sold on Stones and Kyle Walker. There's a lot of mistakes in them as well. The only defender I have full confidence in is Luke Shaw. I think Maguire's confidence has been knocked, but he's starting to pick it up again. But if only one out the back four I really have true confidence in is Luke Shaw, we have a problem. We have a massive problem. The problem is there's not many other good centre backs who are eligible to play for England right now. That's the massive problem. That is the issue. And Dyer. Yeah. Oh dear. I hope not either. I think he's good technically on the ball, and he's a good, just defensive midfielder at best. I wouldn't have him as a playmaker. I wouldn't have him as a centre back. He's just a solid midfielder, not outstanding. He's got some good technical skills, but his passing, his decision making, his lack of pace. I don't know. What am I looking most forward to? The Euros, Olympics, Lions Tour, Rugby League World Cup. Well, obviously the World Championship Ice Hockey, I might catch the odd game. I might catch up with some of the highlights this evening. So that's currently on. The Olympics, we don't know. There's growing calls to cancel the Olympics that have been growing in intensity with these with no overseas fans being allowed at the Olympics. That's a Japanese government decision now. But the Japanese government said they're not postponing or cancelling. It is going ahead. The Rugby League World Cup, obviously, every game free to wear. I'm really looking forward to that in October. But that's obviously for the end of the summer. That's obviously down the track. That's a good 4 or 5 months away. I am looking forward to that. And what is interesting about all these international tournaments is they all were postponed last year, apart from the Rugby League World Cup. There are growing calls to cancel the Olympics. The Lions Tour, will it go to South Africa? Will it be played here? The Euros, there were calls to have it all in one country, relocate it all to the UK. They're still going with the 11 city, 11 country model. And each country's got its own COVID protocols and restrictions. So that's going to be interesting to see if they can actually pull that off in 3 weeks' time and get all the games played. They've already had to drop venues. Dublin's already been dropped. Brussels got dropped before COVID because of stadium build issues. On the Rugby League World Cup, I am looking forward to that. The Rugby League World Cup organisers have stated several things, and they've been very, very transparent throughout the whole process over the last 16 months. Full attendance, all fans allowed in. Reduced attendance, so depending on capacity limits, which looks more likely at this stage, or no attendance. But all three options, they take place on time this year. The last ditch resort is to delay it by another 12 months and play it next year. And they don't want to do that. If they get full attendance, perfect. Reduced attendance, they get a bigger grant from the government. No attendance, they get a far bigger grant from the government. Pushing it back a year, that could affect a whole load of things. I'm most looking forward to the Rugby League World Cup, if I'm brutally honest. The Olympics, it's the time zone difference. I already wake up early on weekends to watch the NRL on the NRL website. Some games kick off at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning our time. So the Olympics is on a similar time zone. So that will restrict the amount of the Olympics coverage I will be able to watch. Plus, I've obviously got a full-time job. The Euros, again, some of the kickoff times, because it's pan-European, I won't be able to watch every single game, again, because I have a full-time job. The Lions Tour, I don't have Sky, although I think some of the warm-up games will be on the BBC, which is nice. But we're not even sure if the Lions Tour is actually going to get to South Africa. It might be played here. There's still things up in the air about that. But I'm most looking forward to the Rugby League World Cup. That's what I'm most looking forward to out of all the tournaments. We know what the organisers have been very transparent. They want it to go ahead this year. If there's no fans in attendance, they would rather have that than postpone it. All the others have been postponed or have had issues to do with protocols, COVID, and all this. The Olympics is the one which has got the most problems. Whether it takes place or not, the Japanese government's saying yes, no overseas fans allowed. We'll have to see how the Olympics goes down. England versus India. Now, this is interesting because obviously with the cancellation of the remainder of the IPL, it's very interesting. The ECB obviously came forward with an offer to finish the tournament here. Now, the weather's been absolutely diabolical, so I don't know how many games have actually got played. But the ECB obviously thinking logistically, because there is a test series against India, all the players are here, already quarantined, already, fulfilling the protocols, going through tests, flow tests, and being based here, logistically makes sense. And the Board of Cricket Classification India, Board of Cricket Control India, the BCCI, said, no, we are just suspending the IPL. We are going to complete the tournament. And then within 2 days, went, no, it's completely cancelled. We're not going to finish. I'm not even sure if the England-India Test Series will actually go ahead at this stage. Personally, it should be on free-to-air TV. But the ECB, with all their problems, are forcing the 100 through. And we're not even sure if fans are going to be allowed in large numbers for the 100. But that's another discussion for another video. My thoughts on the 100 and the ECB's persistence with a very flawed product. Very flawed product. Yes. Now, it will be interesting because before the Rio Olympics, we had the Zika virus concerns all those years ago. And, there were concerns about athlete safety then. And measures put in place, to make sure, protocols, catch the virus. We've had political pullouts before with the Olympics, with political boycotts, mostly in the 80s. It will be interesting to see if any Olympic committees decide not to send athletes for safety reasons. That will be something that I will be following for the next 3 months till August. I will be looking at that very intently. I don't have a team for the 100 because it's crap. It's not because there's no team, it's shit. It's a shit concept, and it's desperation from the ECB trying to, rebrand cricket. No, it's pure desperation from an organisation that has turned a lot of fans off because of its TV deal and its lack of accessibility, and it's trying to fix the problems of its own creation. That's why I don't have a team in the 100, because it's a crap format. You just ask any cricket fan, anyone who's played or watched the game, it's a crap format. But it will be interesting to see if any Olympic pullouts happen. We have seen it boycotts before, mostly political based, as I said, but the Zika virus for the Rio Olympics in 2016 and for the World Cup as well in 2014 was on the agenda then, and there were concerns that some athletes decided not to go individually. Of course, the Russian boycotts and all that, and the American and Russian boycotts of the 80 and 84 games in LA and Moscow. So we had political boycotts before. And we have had individual athletes pull out over safety fears or health concerns at previous Olympic Games. It will be interesting to see how many nations decide not to send athletes this year. That has got to be a concern for the organisers. I wouldn't say it's 20 years of arrogance and greed. It's I think more 16, 17. But the ECB has mismanaged the sport catastrophically, um, and we are where we are, and yet no one who is a commentator or a player, not enough people are speaking now about the flawed concept. It's a gimmick. A sport that introduces gimmicks is a sport in trouble. Rule changes is one thing where you want to increase player safety, spectator safety. That's fine. Okay, I have no issue with that. Tweaking a few of the formats like the T20 and one days, we have the power play overs. I'm fine with that because you've still got 6 ball overs and you've got each side gets a full innings. This is a gimmick, and when a sport is introducing gimmicks to try and attract new fans whilst risking turning off the existing fan base, it's not a great look. It'll be interesting the viewership figures, considering that the Euros is on, the Olympics is on, Wimbledon is on, the Rugby League World Cup at the end of the summer, beginning of the autumn. You've got the NFL London series coming back. Hopefully, fingers crossed, if you're an NFL fan. It'll be interesting to see the viewership figures with a lot of these other big major sporting events this summer and autumn. It'll be very interesting to see the attendance and viewership figures, if fans are allowed in large numbers for one, but viewership figures on TV and internet. If they're not great, it's not a good look because they've said a minimum of 2 years, and they've even stated it's not going to make a profit in its first 2 to 3 years anyway. At a time when the ECB is begging for cash and has announced that it's made massive financial losses in the last 15 months. But the ECB have mismanaged it. They mismanaged the TV rights. They chased the greed. In 2005, when we won the Ashes, they were having discussions while the Ashes were going on 16 years ago with Sky as the only broadcaster. Massive mistake. Massive mistake. They went from BBC to Channel 4 because Channel 4 had advertising revenue. Since Channel 4 has lost the cricket, its sporting side of things has really struggled. And they're in financial difficulty as well because they've lost 20 odd million viewers on average every summer. Cricket's not for everyone. That's fine. The fact that the ECB is trying to chase new fans at the risk of turning off the existing fan base that A is passionate and B is declining anyway is not a good sign. The fact they brought in a gimmick is not a good sign. It's a sign that is a sport that is in trouble and is on the back foot and is clearly a sport that is dying, basically. Don't get me wrong. My local cricket club is half a mile, if that, walk, 500 metres walk, and I'm watching, club cricket. But the fact that they are this desperate, that for the last 2 or 3 years they've been forcing this agenda through, and it's meeting more. You've just got to look at social media. The thing is, it's been very quiet on the old news front in regards to the 100. There's not been a lot of build up to it. They've already delayed it by a year. They've already stated they're going to lose money in the first 2 years. If they break even, that is a bonus. They don't plan to break even in the first 2 years, which is an absolute shambles. The Alan Stanford series, the $1 million or £1 million game, when he flew the laundered money, as it turned out, because he had been running a Ponzi scheme and was siphoning funds off investors for 20 years in Antigua. That was just hilarious. The fact that the money that was part of that one-off match between England and the West Indies was laundered, dirty money shows how cricket and corruption go hand in hand and have done in increasing regularity in the last 25 years. I mean, Shane Warne and was it Mark Waugh? Obviously, in 1995, if I remember correctly, was selling information on pitch conditions and who would bat first if they won the toss or bowl first to an Indian bookmaker. That got revealed 3 years later that they were having discussions about selling information on team selection and pitch conditions to a bookmaker, which is dodgy. Hansi Cronje in the late 90s as well obviously got lied before a parliamentary committee in South Africa. I mean, South Africa's one of the most, not the most, well, it's a bit of a corrupt country, but when it comes to sport in South Africa, it's religion, be it rugby or cricket, and even for the the black community in South Africa, football. When you start fiddling that, that is not good. The South Africans are passionate about their sport. Hansie Cronje with the match fixing scandal in South Africa at the end of the 90s was very damaging for a country that was just coming out of apartheid, was re-entering the sporting world, because it was in the sporting wilderness for 20, 25 years, mass political boycotts. You got Srisanth in India. He's in prison now. You had the Pakistani spot fixing scandal. You had the sandpaper scandal with Bancroft and Warner and Smith. You had the Pakistani ball tampering. There's been other allegations of corruption in the IPL. Even Alex Stewart, former England captain and wicketkeeper, stated that towards the end of his career, and this is on the record, he said this in interviews, that he was offered money to fix matches. He was approached by a random individual in a car park. I think he was outside Essex Cricket Club. He was playing away. He was obviously Surrey batsman, wicketkeeper, and he was playing an away match. And he was about to travel home after the day's play, and he was approached in the car park of the ground by a bookmaker who had a suitcase or a duffel bag full of money to throw matches. Then you have, I forget the young English bowler who went to prison for match fixing. I think he played for Essex. I forget his name, but there was about 5-6 years ago, there was a young up and coming pace bowler who got caught and banned and went to prison. Yeah, the whole sleaze surrounding cricket. It's a sport that's very easily fixed if you know what you're doing. Match fixing is difficult, but spot fixing. Look at Pakistan in the one-day game with all their run-outs. Brilliant side. God, you put Pakistan on their day, they can beat anyone in all formats. T20, one-days, test matches. They can beat anyone on their day. But then you look at some of the really bizarre run-outs that they've had and stumpings and batting collapses. And you think to yourself, how, when they won the game before at a breeze, some of the India-Pakistan T20s and one-day internationals raise a few eyebrows. Cricket does have an issue there. And I've got a book by Phil Tufnell, Phil Tufnell's Guide to the Ashes. And there's a culture of drinking and a bit of drug misuse in cricket. And Phil Tufnell was stated if he was a professional today, he would have been banned for recreational drug use. Yes, we've had. I could do a list of all the sporting scandals. I did a list of all the sporting scandals for my mate. My mate phoned me up. I hadn't spoken to him for a while because he'd been unwell, and I phoned him up to see how he was doing. And he was like, "How you doing?" I said, "Yeah. I'm okay." And he was like, "We got in a conversation. We were on the phone for about 3-4 hours because we hadn't spoken for a long time." And I listed all the sports scandals that Wikipedia have listed, and this is not all of them. These are the big ones. And Christ, yes, Major League Baseball with steroids is well known in Major League Baseball that there's the steroids issue, and it's still ongoing. You got various scandals when it comes to rugby league and rugby union. A lot of it is to do with recreational drugs, and individual players also getting done for performance enhancing, like steroids and blood doping and all that. And I've watched several documentaries and read several articles on the issue of drug misuse in both codes of rugby, be it recreational or performance enhancing. And the list of sports is ridiculous. And the concern, there's an undercover investigative journalist called Declan Hill, which I do recommend that if you are interested in the history of sports corruption and anything like that, just as a topic, just as an interest, just to study. Declan Hill is a very interesting Canadian journalist who normally just did undercover reporting. He was just an undercover journalist, an investigative journalist, who would cover anything from organised crime to political corruption to, let's just say there was a company not fulfilling its regulations, when you've got trade industry regulations on like waste disposal or safety standards. He would cover everything. But someone in Canada, where he's from, approached him and said, I think you should check out the Ontario Soccer League. So a regional semi-pro football league in Toronto, because I believe there's dodgy goings on. And he started investigating that, and he ended up investigating links to the Russian mafia to ice hockey, especially links with players. And then he ended up following the trail of match fixing, not just football. We're talking all sports. And he ended up in Singapore for 5 years. And there were some very nasty criminals who used individual bookmakers and fixers to make large amounts of money for their crime syndicates in Singapore, in the Philippines, in the Yakuza in Japan, the Triads in China, the Vietnamese mafia, the Indian mafia, all these South and Southeast Asian organized criminal syndicates were using illegal betting and match fixing to make large amounts of money for their criminal organizations. These were very dangerous individuals he was investigating. And he now does talks on to the betting industry, the regulated betting industry. And he's also been in front of the Senate committee to do with legalized gambling in the US, because they've liberalized the laws. And not every state has legalized gambling in the US, apart from the state lotteries, of course, and those legitimate and those licensed casinos in certain jurisdictions outside of Nevada, like Atlantic City, Chicago, and stuff like that. And the Senate committee asked him what his views were on legalization, and should the US federally say every state now can regulate legalized gambling. And his answer was, for God's sake, don't do it. In more stronger words than that, but he basically said, just don't do it. And the problem is, and this is what's interesting, I basically just told my mate how to spot fix. It's quite easy, really, because you've got all these betting options now. So if you go on your online, if you do a footy accumulator, or you bet on the horses or whatever, if you go on your online app, or you actually are able to go to a bookmakers, you can choose so many options. Instead of just betting on a result, let's say obviously Tottenham beat Leicester 3-2 today. The odds on that, with Tottenham's form recently, would probably be very, very low. You might get some good odds, actually. The odds of Leicester winning the FA Cup this season, if you were to put a bet down on that, would have been about 1,000 to 1. But you can bet in match. You can bet in cricket how many no balls will be in an innings or in an over. You can bet on how many sixes a batsman will hit. You can bet on how many wides, how many run-outs, how many caught and bowled, stumps, clean bowl. Bet on anything. Football, you can bet on how many offsides, how many yellow cards, how many free kicks, when the goals are scored, who scores the goals, and what the final score is, how many corners. You can bet on how many corners are in the first half. You can bet on a whole variety of outcomes. You can, in snooker, you can bet on how many times a player's going to get a 147 in the tournament, let alone in a match. Now, the betting companies have a red flag system when they see suspicious betting patterns. The betting companies also go by the form book. So there have been some shock results in a variety of team sports. We're like, how the hell did that happen? And there have been some really odd results in the NRL this weekend. There's been some really odd results in the football. There's been some really odd results. And I look at some of these results going, really? Really? The betting companies will flag if they feel there's suspicious betting patterns. Now, I think it was last season in the Swedish Hockey League, a game was cancelled because of match fixing allegations before the match was even played. Which is very interesting. What do I think about Aguero's career and his apparent future at Barca? Well, Barca are getting him on a free, because obviously his contract expires at the end of the season at Man City. But he's been a brilliant player at Atletico, and obviously at Man City. A brilliant player for a very, very long time. Very long time. It will be interesting to see what happens at Barcelona with Sergio Aguero. It really will. He's right at the end of his career. He's starting to pick up a lot more injuries. Um, Obviously, Messi looks like he's on the way out. However, if they can entice Messi to stay, he's got his international teammate and strike partner with him, and they do, know each other from Argentina. So it'll be interesting. I think if Messi decides to leave Barcelona, PSG want to pick up Messi, and again, that'll be on a free as well. End of contract. That's where I think what's happening here. The more interesting thing is Man City have stated that they are not in the market for a like-for-like replacement. So the rumours of Harry Kane going to Man City, I'll be like, well, they're not planning to replace Aguero. So they're either going to promote a player from the youth setup or they're going to convert, say, Sterling into Aguero's role or convert Foden into Aguero's role, most likely. Yeah, well, I don't get the betting. I think Stuart Bingham as well is another one. John Higgins linked to. He even admitted taking bribes to throw frames, even though he wasn't found guilty. There was enough evidence to say that you took bribes. You took money. I think £200,000. I think John Higgins took in bribes, and he gets very shitty with the media when they bring that up. But no, he's a cheat. Yeah, the amount. This is the battle we're having with. They're trying to prevent too many ads during the Euros on ITV when it comes to gambling firms having advertising during ad breaks. But look at the amount of sports teams, not just in the UK, but further afield as well. Australia's got Ladbrokes and Unibet are a couple of the sponsors in the NRL of teams, and I think in the AFL as well. The UK is, but here's the thing. I mean, tobacco sponsorship is now banned and has been for 20 odd years. Now, I am a smoker, but I do believe that is the right course of action. But yeah, the Sturridge, which was technically insider trading, if I was to do that on the stock market, I'm going to prison for a very, very long time. You've got inside knowledge on an industry thing that is technically a very serious offence under the law. Trippier, I don't think as bad as Sturridge. The Allardyce one, Allardyce was talking more about getting around transfer rules. That's how he cost him the England job rather than betting rules. But Stuart Bingham in snooker, that's another one. He took a 6-month ban. Stephen Lee got 10-year ban, ended his career. And the Stuart Bingham video that I've got on this channel still gets views for his 6-month ban for betting offences. That video is 2-3 years old. He's back playing now, but he got banned for a while. Sturridge and Trippier. Trippier I think was a bit naive. He was a bit naive, whereas Sturridge, that was pre-planned insider knowledge on potential transfers that he was feeding his associates to make money. Whereas Trippier was a bit more naive and a bit stupid and shouldn't have done it, but I don't think he had any malicious intent. But Stuart Bingham admitted to breaching betting rules. Remember Chopra, ex-Cardiff and Newcastle player, Sunderland player? He had gambling addiction, which is different, admittedly. Joey Barton, placing bets in breach of betting rules. When he was a player and in his early days as a manager. There's been some high-profile ones, absolutely. And not just in football, but as I say, Stuart Bingham, for example, is an example of a player who got caught, got a 6-month ban, and it's a difficult one. In France, they ban alcohol sponsorship on jerseys. So if you're the away team, let's say when Liverpool had Carlsberg as their shirt sponsor back in the day, or Newcastle when they had Nuki Brown, so back in the 90s, and they were playing a European Cup game of any kind, like Cup Winners' Cup or UEFA Cup or Champions League, and they were playing in France. They had no sponsorship on their jerseys. Under French law, alcohol sponsorship is banned. European wide, or I think globally now, tobacco sponsorship is banned. And no one complains in France that alcohol sponsorship is banned on jerseys. No one complains that tobacco sponsorship is no longer on jerseys. Or predominantly motorsport was tobacco sponsorship, although rugby league had a long history with the tobacco companies in Australia and England sponsoring the Challenge Cup, for example, the Silk Cup, and Winfield, obviously, and Rothmans, which is British American Tobacco, sponsored what was the New South Wales Rugby League at the time, which is now the NRL, and sponsored all their award ceremonies and stuff. And that was the 80s. That was the 80s and the 90s. 2000 comes along and that ended. F1 held on for a couple more years because of contractual agreements that were in place. But no, I'm not a fan of the betting companies having as much exposure that they do, apart from horse racing. I understand horse racing because it's heavily reliant on that industry for its income. But no, other sports, I'm not overly keen on it. I don't like it. I never have liked it. That's again my personal opinion as well. But yeah, there is a growing pressure to reduce the amount of gambling. I mean, snooker is heavily reliant now on betting companies sponsoring. Look at the players. Do you wonder why Stephen Lee's got a 10-year ban? Stuart Beam got a 6-month ban. John Higgins and Maguire have been investigated for match fixing allegations, taking bribes and irregular betting patterns in some of their games. Snooker has a lot of gambling firms sponsoring individual players and tournaments. And that is a concern, a massive concern. But the betting companies themselves do have a red flag system where they can alert the authorities to suspicious betting patterns and concerns regarding, match fixing in regards to, gambling, especially illegal gambling or insider knowledge on a result. But yes, I think the government and media. I think the media obviously makes a lot of money from the TV rights, and of course, part of that is to do with sponsorship deals and advertising revenue. So they've got to be careful because they got to if the betting ads are pulled from TV and on internet streams, for example, and this is what pisses me off. So I'm a massive sports fan, right? But I'm also a massive history and film buff as well. If you look at my desk behind me, there's a lot of my films. I've got more films down there. I've got books in various boxes around the flat. I'm still organising the flat all these months later. My girlfriend's pushed me to start. So as you can see, I've rotated the bed and I've moved some furniture around. But when I've been obviously watching, say, a sports YouTuber or actually watching the NRL website, for example, which I have a subscription for, and I've been watching some games, which I have done today. Later on, after I've obviously, because my YouTube channel is a sports channel, this is important. Later on, when I let's say put on a metal detecting video, I like my metal detecting as a hobby, and I follow a couple of YouTubers who do metal detecting and exploring, caving and stuff. Obviously, the mid-roll ads come on, the ads before the video come on, and a lot of them will be betting ads, and it is absolutely frustrating. I have no interest. But it's the analytics and the tracking cookies have tracked what I've been watching and what websites I've got on my phone. So I've been checking the sports websites for the football results today, for example, and the F1 and all that. And they are tracking what I'm consuming. And I'm getting bombarded with sports ads. Now, I don't mind ads for video games because I like my video gaming as well. There's a few video game YouTubers who I follow as well. And when I'm watching their videos, I will get some, ads for upcoming video games. It's fine. But I look at it, and this is how dangerous it is. This is the gambling kind of thing. Now, I'm nearly 32. My girlfriend's nearly 25, so we're like old enough to legally gamble. Okay, we've got no kids, in our relationship, so no kids in the flat or anything like that when she's over. We're both old enough to legally go down the bookmakers or go on the internet if we want to set up an account and gamble. We can play the lottery. I've got a scratch card to cash in my bag. That's fine. But let's hypothetically say my girlfriend comes over and brings like her nieces and nephews for the day, and we're on YouTube. Gambling app will come on. That is what concerns me: is the ease of access for children and young teenagers to be exposed to gambling ads. And the link with sport, yes. Yeah, I will finish this live stream. I'll do some editing. I might do a couple of video ideas for, let's say, a big sporting story breaks. I'll say like Harry Kane was like being linked with Man City. I could discuss whether that would work or not. Like Aguero, will he go to Barcelona? Is that confirmed? Will Messi in the PSG? We could discuss that. I'll go and watch a video on YouTube later, and I bet you the first or second ad that comes up is Ladbrokes or Bet365 or Betfair or Jennings Bet or whatever it is, William Hill, Coral, and I will get about 5 to 10 of them before I go to bed about 10, 11 o'clock. Between now and by the time, in about 4 hours' time when I go to sleep, I'll be on YouTube. I'll just be casually seeing what YouTubers, follow my favourite YouTubers, and I bet you between now and when I go to bed at about 10, 11 o'clock, I get 4 to about 15 gambling ads. And some of them will be unskippable. A lot of them will be unskippable as well. If I then watch a sporting YouTube, like the hockey guy, for example, it almost seems that every ad I get on his channel is an unskippable ad from a betting company. That is between 6 and 30 seconds long. I can't skip it. Adblock can also come with other issues. I try and keep as much non-necessary crap off the laptop. Because some ads are quite funny, actually. I like watching some of the ads, especially if it's a YouTube that I do support and I don't skip the ads because they need the income. I like some of the film trailers and gaming ads that come on. I'm not gonna lie. I find it frustrating, and I bet you some of you are under the age of 18 that are watching this video. I look at my analytics regularly about who watches what, and most of the age group that watches are the 18 to 35 age group, which is my target age group, ironically, for content. But over the years, I follow my analytics, and some of my subscribers are 15, 16, 17 years old. And now they've changed the National Lottery laws, so you have to be 18 to buy a scratch card and 18 to do the National Lottery. The fact is, though, that if you don't have YouTube Premium, or if you want to be brave and use Adblock, which sometimes can have negative consequences for your system, because some of them come with inbuilt viruses, ironically, some days about a third of the ads that I see are gambling related. And it is absolutely frustrating. And out of them, about 80% are non-skippable as well. They're very short and sharp. They're very smart now, these gambling ad companies. Those who paid the advertising firm for their advert, very, very smart. They know that their ads will get skipped a lot of the time if they're more than 30 seconds, so they make them the unskippable ones, which is the most frustrating, especially if they're back-to-back. Absolutely rip my hair out. But I know I want to watch the video that some of my favourite creators have put up. I know when I watch the NRL live streams, I can't avoid the Australian feed with their Ladbrokes ads. It happens, or Unibet. It happens, but they're not constant. It's not every ad break. It's. I think there's a cut-off point for Australia on timing, like Watershed, like we have here, before they can put on betting ads. I think it has to be after 9 p.m. in Australia. I may be wrong, but it is absolutely incessant. Ferran Torres or Delap could play the role, but as a City fan, I think they need to sign some sort of forward. Do you think they need to take a signing stand? I think next season's Premiership is going to be much more interesting than people realise. I think there's been a bit of a power shift in the Premier League. I generally think there's been a bit of a power shift. But it's been such a topsy-turvy league. I mean, the only reason why Man City won is they got through the festive period by grinding out results, whereas the other clubs dropped away. had they had had they also dropped a few games, it would have been a much tighter Premiership race. With four, just look at the battle for Europe today. It went down to the wire between three clubs for two Champions League spots. So I honestly believe that had City had a few more struggles over the festive period, where the rest of the league did, then they would have had a tougher time of it. I think next season's going to be very interesting. But I don't know who they sign. I mean, they've stated quite openly that they're not planning a like-for-like replacement. I think they're going to work with some of the young players coming through the academy and rotate some players around a little bit and convert some players and alter things a little bit. But no, on the betting side of things, yeah, the government I think is starting to feel the heat. I think sport is starting to feel the backlash. There's been enough pressure put upon it that they're now saying that the advertising firms that make the adverts and publish the adverts are limited in how many they can show, because surveys proved that in the last two international football tournaments and the Rugby World Cup, 2 years ago, that the amount of adverts that were betting related were a far too high a percentage. Notice that fast food ads can't be shown before the watershed now, which is interesting. They have to be shown between certain hours of the day. Bear that in mind. I'm not saying ban gambling ads completely. Absolutely not, because that is again unfair on these companies. They have to make money. I think there is a place for sports gambling, but I think it's got so in your face that we need to balance. There's been a lack of balance, and because the tobacco revenue has been taken away, and less alcohol companies, which again is a pretty bad thing, are sponsoring professional sport than they used to. I've noticed that there's a drop in let's say beer or whiskey sponsoring. I think that's another thing. We'll see. I think Haaland and Sancho may stay where they are for this season. I think this season they may stay put. I think it'll be and this time next year where they possibly move and change clubs. But we'll see. It depends if Dortmund are willing to slip further down the Bundesliga. I don't think they are. I think they want to keep them and try and get back to where they were at the top. That's my personal opinion on that one. But no, the gambling ad thing, I mean, it's been done with tobacco. It's been done with alcohol in France. It's been done with fast food as well, limiting the hours of the day that they can advertise. Not banned completely. I think, gambling ads, I mean, because you're watching a sports-based channel now, the next video you watch, just put in the comments of any of my videos. I had so many gambling ads come up from the last video I watched. It'll be very interesting. But I do think that is on the table. I think Haaland and Sancho stay where they are, but I do think it will be interesting to watch this year's transfer market. Very interesting. We'll have to see how it plays out. But yeah, the transfer market, much like the January transfer window, is a little bit suppressed. I think football is still recovering from the pandemic. I don't think we're going to see transfer records broken ever again. And I don't think some of the fees being asked are ridiculous, and I don't think there's the appetite from fans and the justification is, I think, the word I'm looking for. It's unjustifiable, the amount of money they're asking for some of these transfer fees is ridiculous. But I've made my view on this clear for years, that I think the transfer market is overinflated and unjustifiable anyway. Just look at the European Super League and why those teams signed up to it in the first place. They made massive losses apart from Chelsea. And look at the transfer money they have spent and the wages they are paying players. Just bear that in mind. Just look at the wages players have been paid, the agents' fees and the transfer fees being overinflated. And these clubs, while times were good, could get away with it and could cover their losses. You turn off the tap of fans and attendance. Apparently, we're more important than they claimed we were. We were far more important than they were claiming we were for years. Other sports have also been feeling the effect of no fans going to games, and it's had an impact, a massive impact. They cannot take us for granted again. It'll be interesting to see what ticket prices are like next season when fans are allowed back in, and in what numbers we're allowed back in next season. Very interesting. That'll be something to look out for, is how much it would cost to go see your team play. It doesn't matter what division, doesn't matter what sport or what league. Look at how much the ticket price will cost from next season. All these sports leagues and teams, football included, have to make their money back. They've had a real tough time. Football, I think, has been the most exposed to how badly financially run, how poorly governed football has been for years. Football has been so badly run for years and so badly governed for such a long time that this pandemic has exposed the poorly regulated and poorly governed sport that it is. And reform needs to happen. And while I'm not happy with the UEFA reforms for the European format for the Champions League and this new third-tier European competition, we'll see what happens. I think unless they bring in a salary cap, the record will be broken again. I don't think soon. I think it will be at some point. Give it 5 or 10 years, not anytime soon, not with the losses incurred. But a salary cap will need to be implemented. But if you implement it, they risk a Major League Baseball style boycott. I think the players have to realise that their wages and their transfer fees are not sustainable. And when you've got lesser leagues, smaller leagues, lower division leagues saying we need a salary cap desperately, the current model is unsustainable and has been pre-COVID. Look at Bury, for example, as an example, going out of business before COVID. If the players decide to boycott, they'll very quickly lose the position they're in because the players refused to agree to wage deferrals and pay cuts anyway. The PFA, in England at least, advised their members against that. And then when you have clubs like Tottenham and Liverpool and other Premier League clubs at the time, including Bournemouth and Brighton, putting staff on furlough because they claimed they couldn't afford to pay them, but they could not come to an agreement with their playing squads. And then the PFA coming in saying, don't take these wage cuts or wage deferrals. It raises concerns. And Major League Baseball as well is another league and another sport that doesn't have a salary cap. Every other sport I can think of has a spending cap or salary cap or some kind of financial constraint to make it A, an even playing field, and B, to control cost. It actually means you actually get to maximise your profits, by the way. Bit of a strange one, that. Major League Baseball and football globally, apart from Major League Soccer and the A-League in Australia, has no salary cap, as far as I am aware. And that is a problem. And it's one of the reasons why we had this European Super League mess a couple of weeks ago. Is the losses some of these, you look at the debts that some of these clubs have or some of the losses they've made in the last 12 months, it is staggering. If these were standalone, some of these clubs deserve to be in administration. And I think Tottenham are at the biggest risk of going into administration. If they were a standalone club, they would be buggered. Absolutely buggered. If Man City was standalone, they would be buggered as well. The only reason why Man City are not buggered is they've got a whole state called United Arab Emirates basically bankrolling them. Same with PSG. with Qatar. Same with Monaco. They've got some very wealthy people bankrolling them as a tax write-off. So they can afford to make the losses, even though they're actually in breach of financial fair play, but they can afford to make the losses. Chelsea, ironically, made a profit in the last 12 months. They're the only one of the 12 Super League clubs to make a profit. Liverpool didn't disclose their financial situation. All the others have made losses of varying degrees, including on top of their existing debts. They're asset rich, but cash strapped. And I don't know what else you can say to that, really. But even without the pandemic, the football structures that were in place anyway financially were not sustainable long term. The question was, and this has been in the media for years, is when will the money bubble burst? Because the TV deals have peaked. They're not going to get any bigger. They're going to stay level or stagnate or eventually shrink. The TV deal for the Premier League has reached its maximum. It will not get any bigger in real terms. Actual terms it might, but in real terms it won't because of inflation. Yeah, but other big clubs have not got away with it, have they? That's the interesting thing. Other big clubs have hit financial problems. Rangers, a big club in Scotland, have had to liquidate and reform. Dortmund at one point were basically bankrupt and still have financial issues now. You've got, some Premier League clubs have hit the wall several times. Leeds United being one in the past that spent most of the last 16 years basically broke. And there's only so long you can get away with it. Valencia in Spain is out of cash. They can't rebuild their stadium. Their new stadium they've stopped construction. They can't afford to finish it. You've got issues in Italian football, French football, German football. Yes, fans own a majority stake in the clubs. Doesn't mean they have any money. The French TV deal was completely collapsed. It's not a sustainable model. And it hasn't been a sustainable model for a very, very long time. It just sped up the bubble bursting and the debts increasing. But the bubble was going to burst in about 5-10 years' time anyway. This just highlighted and sped up the process of the fact that the game and the sport needs to bring in a salary cap, needs to properly enforce financial fair play or reform it. And, at the end of the day, I'm just going through. I just want to see one in the French league. Let's have a look at. Talk about ice hockey. They finally put the Britain beaten by Slovakia at the World Championships, which is let's have a look. What story? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. It's the 24th article. British ice hockey. 24th article. It's shocking. This is why I hate the BBC. Right, let's have a look at the table. Let's have a look at see where PSG finished. Did they win the title? Did Lille do it for home? Lille have won the French league. It's brilliant. Lille have won. Lille beat Lyon 3-2. The French league has finished as follows: Lille top, 73 points. PSG second, 72 points. Monaco third, 71. It came down to the last day. Lyon fourth with 67. That is a really positive result. Couldn't be happy with that one. Lille have won the French league. That is brilliant. I'm liking that a lot. Why doesn't PSG attract a lot of French fans? PSG is not the biggest club in France for fan base. It is a merger of two clubs in 1970. I think I've done a history video on PSG before Neymar. I think it was just after Neymar's transfer. I did a history video on PSG. I think in 2017 or 2018. It is on the channel. So I did a history at that point. Obviously, we're 3 years down the track. They've won some more trophies since then. They have spent a lot of time in the second tier. They did merge in 1917 to form PSG. It's only in recent years that they've become the most successful French side. They're not the biggest fan base. Marseille, Montpellier, and Lyon have more fans, and Lille are the 5th biggest just. So they're not the biggest fan base. They're not the biggest club in France. Not by a long shot. Why don't they attract a lot more French fans? Because they're not as historical. They're not as well established. They've only been going for 51 years. They're not on the same historical footprint that other clubs in France are. Plain and simple. They do have a history. They had a history in the 70s as well. They actually have some trophies in the 70s and 80s. They went through a lean patch. They got a couple of titles before the money, and then they were in the second division when they were bought by the current ownership. They were really buggered. And no, there are other big clubs in the north of France. French football is not the major sport in France. It's not the biggest sport viewership. The TV deal was really poor. It's not a great TV deal they currently have. The TV deal actually collapsed during COVID last season. You're new here. What's the topic? It's a sports discussion. If you've got any sports questions, throw them out there. It's always interesting to have a new viewer and someone asking some new questions. But PSG is not the biggest club in France for fan base. It's not the. You take the money out of it, they're a mid-table side at best. They really are, and that's at a push. But yeah, they formed out of a merger of two clubs in 1970. I've got the history video is up there on the channel. I haven't done a club history video for a long time, but I am tempted to do one soon at some point. But obviously, the flat doesn't really conduce itself to getting the whiteboard out and spending a lot of time. But yeah, no, the PSG have a very short history in comparison to other clubs in Europe. They're a baby club in comparison to some of the other teams that they compete against. But it is what it is. Like, am I smoking weed? No, I'm smoking tobacco. I don't smoke weed anymore. A long time ago I did, but not anymore. Just normal cigarettes. No hashish there. But no, just sports discussion in general. Like the fact that PSG haven't won is good for European football. It's good for French football. It's important for French football. I think the next league to be sorted out, whether the dominance is broken, is the German league with Bayern Munich winning 9 in a row. That is not healthy for a league. I like the German model with fan ownership, but it's not healthy for the league. I think the last team to win the title was Dortmund, and before that, the last team that wasn't Bayern to win the title was Wolfsburg. It's not a good sign for a league if you want to sell your product overseas that the same team wins every year. I mean, yeah, they've been brilliantly well run. They've been very dominant. There was a period of time when Bayern Munich were not the most dominant side. I've done a video on Borussia Mönchengladbach. The 70s was their decade, and that's the beginning of the Bayern Munich success story. Some say yes and no. I mean, they are a well-supported club. They're a well-run club. They've got pretty solid finances, but I wouldn't say necessarily that winning 9 in a row is necessarily good. But under the German model, they haven't necessarily always been the most dominant. The thing is, with the German model, after Euro 2000, they basically tore up everything. Um, they went back to the drawing board and went, okay, we're not producing the caliber of player we were before. We've been embarrassed at the Euros in Euro 2000. That was their worst tournament they've ever had. And, you know, the fact that they turned down the Super League is important, and Dortmund as well. Dortmund and Munich actually have a lot of success in Europe historically. The fact that they turned down the European Super League is what killed the European Super League. The European Super League stated they wanted 15 founder members. They got 12. Um, so we'll see what happens. We'll see if Bayern continue their success with Leipzig's manager. I forget his name; it's almost unpronounceable. He's young. He's younger than some of the players he'll be coaching, and they have had a few players move on at the end of this season. So some key players that be part of this 9 in a row moving on. It will be interesting, to see if they can maintain their top status, considering that there is a power shift. Juventus haven't finished in the top 4 in Italy. So every club has its purple patch, and at some point you have to go into a rebuild, you have to go into a retool, you have a down period. Um, you know, I Bayern seem to be the club that goes, oh, there's another team challenging us, we'll take their best players. Um, but I think the German model works better for fans, at least, whereby they have a say in how their club is run and the direction the club takes. However, I'm not sure how long Bayern can sustain their dominance, and it will be, I think, refreshing to have a new team or another team win. When Wolfsburg did it in 2009, it was refreshing. When Dortmund did it a few times. Dortmund is a very successful club. Let's not forget that Dortmund is a very, very successful team. There's no denying that. They've had a poor season by their standards. But Leipzig is a new force in German football, and I would expect Leipzig with the Red Bull 49% stake in the club to have a lot of money pumped in there. I can't see Leipzig going away. We'll see what happens. We will see what happens. I don't think Atletico get raided. Atalanta have kept a good core of their squad together and are still very competitive in Serie A. I don't think Lille will get raided. I think those players like playing for that club. And winning trophies will actually attract players to a team. And getting that Champions League football and winning a league title will attract players to your club. I think out of the big 5 European leagues, as they're named for revenue, and Champions League and Europa League club numbers of clubs, the French league is the weakest by a very large distance. That is the weakest league out of the 5. The fact a new team has won it is important. The fact that Lille have won it before is another thing, but the fact that it's not PSG winning it is very, very important for that league's health and direction. But you look at the top 4; they're the last 4 winners of that league. Apart from, I believe, Montpellier won it once in the last 15 years. The top 4 is the 4 most successful clubs in the last 20 years in France. Marseille, Montpellier notwithstanding, I think Bordeaux as well notwithstanding, with the odd title in there. That's your 4 clubs that have really dominated French football for the last 20 years are at the top of the league, and that tells you something. I think we'll see what happens with German football. We'll see what happens in the Euros as well. I think this tournament's going to be very interesting. I think with the pan-European model that they have for the Euros, travel in the group stage and the knockout stages is going to have an effect on players. And I think the variance in weather conditions as well over the tournament, over the month that the Euros is being played, because it's been played across the continent. I think fatigue and changeable weather conditions, from the fact we're playing games in Scotland all the way to St. Petersburg, to Azerbaijan, to Spain, to Italy, basically across the whole of continental Europe. Those changing weather conditions from one location to another. Baku could be at 35 degrees Celsius. I know it's on the Caspian Sea, so there's a bit of a cooling effect from the inland sea that Caspian Sea is. But then you're playing in St. Petersburg, then you're playing at Hamden. Hamden could be like 15 degrees. That is going to have an impact on how the tournament's played. And of course, not every location's got fans in attendance yet in any number. That is going to be interesting as well. There obviously were calls to have the whole tournament played in England, or Great Britain at least, if you count Hampden Park in Scotland. Considering that England, Wales, and Scotland have all qualified for the tournament, playing it in the home nations. UEFA are obviously stuck with their pan-European model. Bilbao's game's been moved to Seville, I believe, to Sevilla's ground, not Betis's ground. Obviously, for whatever reason, Bilbao felt the pandemic and the rate of infection. And of course, it's an autonomous region, being the Basque Country as well. Spain is a very interesting political entity where it's got loads of autonomous regions where they can dictate health and safety regulation and their own domestic laws. The Sam Manish would have been a brilliant stadium to play international football. It really would have. However, they've decided to go with Seville. So it's still in Spain, so Spain hasn't lost out. Italy have got the Stadio Olimpico. The San Siro, I think, would have been a better stadium, but they've gone with Rome, and that is a fair choice. Dublin obviously lost out a month ago. It was announced that Dublin had obviously, with concerns about the pandemic and the infection rate, they forfeited their matches, which is a massive blow to the FIA, the Football Association of Ireland, which has got money problems as well, which is well documented. They would have got some income from the Aviva Stadium, basically Lansdowne Road, hosting games. And that is a big financial blow for the Irish FA. Belgium, obviously, their stadium didn't even get completed. UEFA basically pulled Brussels from hosting any tournament matches, and that was back in 2017. So this has already been a tournament that's been beset with issues from the day it was announced as a pan-European tournament. Within a short period of time, UEFA said, we're never doing this again, which is striking. This was a Platini idea, not a Serafin idea. And I think Serafin has realised it is a terrible mistake, including avoiding Baku Europa League final a couple of seasons ago, which did not go down well with fans either. It's interesting. I think the concept, because it's the anniversary, the 60th anniversary at the time, obviously, of the original tournament itself, new locations get some exposure to tournament football, which is a good thing. But there was already concerns that they'd chosen too many locations. You've got different local laws, different currencies, time zones, the whole thing. UEFA said they're not going to do it again. And of course, when they decide European Cup finals, that's done 3-4 years in advance. The decision to go to Porto for the Champions League finals met with a lot of criticism because both sides are English teams. Obviously, Aston Villa approached the FA and UEFA saying, look, one team's from Manchester, one team's from London. We're a nice neutral venue which has historically used to host the FA Cup semi-finals as one of the neutral semi-final venues back in the day. We're located right in the middle of the two teams. Logistically, it makes sense. Rejected. Wembley then put forward an application via the FA to UEFA, was considered, rejected. I find that ridiculous. I find that ridiculous. I can't see how playing the World Cup every 2 years would work, because it would affect the Copa America, North American Caribbean competition, the African Cup of Nations, the Euros, the Asian Cup. That would affect so many things. And when professional sport needs to reduce travel to help in the fight against climate change, and meet carbon emissions and reduce travel for environmental impact, and make sport more sustainable and economic and eco-friendly, that would make no sense. I mean, I love the Euros. I find it a great tournament. I love the African Cup of Nations. I like the South American equivalent, the Copa America. I love these international tournaments. I don't see why moving the World Cup every 2 years works. How would you qualify? How would the qualification process work? I mean, we're meant to have a Confederations Cup at some point for the World Cup. How's that going to work? As the test, they're trying to fit in already in a congested international schedule to make it where it's insane. European football is where the money's made, and all these other nations are investing in European football. To start fiddling with European football would actually be to damage the product massively damage the product. And the best players come from Europe, or the best players play in Europe, shall I say. Obviously, South America has produced so many talented players as well. South America and Europe is where is the football heartbeat. I don't think 2014 Euros is a bad thing, because it's equivalent to what the World Cup was in the early 90s. I think if the Euros was a 32 team tournament and the World Cup a 32 team tournament, I think that's as far as you can push it. The fact they're trying to expand the World Cup even further is insane. But having a 32 team Euros, I can accept that. It makes it you get to see more football. And I've got nothing against teams like Panama getting to a World Cup because they qualified. I've got nothing against that. That's another 32 teams format. So, I mean, I'm happy with the format we have. At the same time, expanding any further is, a bad idea. Personally, I do agree with that. The Euros, I'm happy with the Euros to expand. I am. It gives exposure to some lesser nations where they've got some quality players who otherwise wouldn't make it to an international tournament. I'm happy with the Euros being expanded. They can't go past 32. That in itself, I think, is the maximum you can have a tournament. We've had the same discussion about rugby union and rugby league expanding in the World Cups, and have they reached their limit where it's feasible logistically to get a tournament of a physical nature? Because rugby league and rugby are brutal contact sports, and making sure that player welfare is there and the turnaround is fair for all teams. And that debate's been had for a long time as well. I like the fact we have what we've got right now. I would think any further expansion is pure greed by UEFA, FIFA, and the other federations. Do I think Brazil have underperformed internationally given their talent pool? Yes, massively underperformed. But it's the style of play the international team plays, and the difference between South American football and European football, tactically, defensively. The skill's there. It's religion in Brazil. It's religious in Brazil football. Same in Argentina, same in all the South American countries. The skill level that they show is they learn it in the favelas, they learn it in the shanty towns. Um, the issue is when the best Brazilians or best South Americans go to the European leagues, the style of football is different. The quality of coaching is better. The style of play, obviously, you want to be more defensively sound. And South American football is all about flair, spontaneity, and to a certain point, cynicism. A fair bit of dirty play as well. You watch a South American football match. It's a different kettle of fish. It's brutal, but they're more free flowing. There's more flair. Defense is secondary. They play with a smile on their face. Whereas if you look at Europe, a lot of the players are overcoached. Yes, no, I mean, I like you look at footage of the South American teams in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and into the early 90s, that defense was not a thing. They played with aggression, but they also played with a lot of flair as well. The Brazil team of 1970, the Argentina team of 78, um, the Argentina team of 86, the Brazil team of 58 and 62. That it was all about just pure spontaneity, flair, and unpredictability. It's so fun to watch. Their games are so open. Um, and apparently, the England Brazil game in 1970 is possibly the best game ever played. And I would argue strongly that still is the best game of international football ever played. Is Brazil, England in the group stage in Mexico in 1970. Bobby Moore and Pele, best game ever played. You have to watch the full 90 minutes. They're playing in searing heat at altitude, and one goal wins it. It was the two best teams in the world at that time going head to head. And the semi-final of Italy-Germany in 1970 is possibly the best knockout game ever played as well. That's my personal opinion. I mean, you can say I'm wrong, but that's my personal opinion on that. Is South American football and European football as well to a certain extent. The flair has been removed. The players are overcoached. They're overpaid as well, but they're overcoached. And they're overcoached in attack as well as defence. You want attack to be free-flowing and just express yourself and pass and move, and you learn your little combinations with your teammates. Defensively, you want to have structure. In order to win, you need to have structure. This is where total football failed for Holland. They were so fluid that defensively they were too fluid. Going forward, it was brilliant because a right back could, be just as quality as a centre forward. My take on the Fury AJ debacle. Well, both fighters have been told they've got to fight. Fury's got to fight Wilder. AJ's got to fight Umsk. They've been told by the various belts that they've got, the various boxing boards, that they've got to have these two other fights. I don't know. I think this is where I've gone off boxing. I've been discussing this with my work colleagues for like the last 2 weeks. The fact it's going to take place in Saudi Arabia worries me. With AJ Anthony Joshua being this people's champion and going on about all his political things, why take the Saudi money? It's called hypocrisy. And Fury, obviously, he does a lot of his fights in the US, and that's partly to do with his promoter. That is what it is. But anything to do with the Hearns is I can't stand. And to be brutally honest, the fact that you've got these rematch clauses written into these title belts is ridiculous. There's no overall governing body. You've got 4 boards of classification. You've got 4 belts to unite. Ridiculous. Boxing has got problems, and it's just a mess. There's going to be legal challenges in there. It's yeah, look, Fury's going to destroy Wilder. We know that. Umsk, we don't know what he's going to bring to the table against Anthony Joshua. Imagine if Joshua gets knocked out by Umsk. That means Umsk has to fight Fury. Surely. You've got that Ruiz Jr., the Mexican. He's come back. He wants another shot. I mean, to me, boxing is a circus. So's MMA as well. Bellator and UFC are a circus too. I'm not a massive fan of them. I prefer Bellator over UFC, but even then, I'm not a massive fan. I think that's become a bit of a shambolic circus. And at the end of the day, like, oh god, boxing. I mean, we've discussed obviously like betting rules and all that. Boxing has had a long history of fights being thrown and fixed for years. Organised crime and boxing go hand in hand. Corruption and boxing go hand in hand. Anything to do with the Hearns reeks of corruption. Reeks of it. Since the Hearns have been involved in snooker, you just look at the players, as I said, that have been linked to match fixing and betting irregularities. Bingham, Stephen Lee, Maguire, Higgins. I think there was a couple of Chinese players as well. I mean, the list goes on. And yeah, cricket in India. I mean, there's corruption in cricket. We know that. But the way the IPL was handled, it should not have gone ahead in India. They should have chosen a neutral location. And yeah, that's a shambles and all. But I could discuss that to death every day of the week. And I'd rather not go on about it because there are other sports to discuss, other issues to discuss. I mean, the Stanley Cup playoffs have started, and there's been some really interesting results. I mean, the NRL is having this foul play crackdown that's turning into a circus as well. But then with India, I mean, I just don't know. The ICC's got problems. The Board of Cricket Control India has really screwed up here because the ECB went to the ICC saying, look, we can finish the IPL in England. We've got the vaccination program. We've got low infection rates. We had this test series against India at the end of the summer. So that means all the players will be already quarantined in location and regularly monitored. And then within 2 days, it's cancelled. It really is bizarre how they've handled all that. But cricket's got massive problems. We discussed it earlier in the stream. I mean, I haven't done a cricket video in a long time. The 100 is just the only people in favour of it are the ECB and those centrally contracted players. There's no one in the media brave enough, an ex-player is brave enough to call it out for what it is, which is a gimmick. Oh yeah, well look, if the Oz players pull out, then they lose on their biggest, draws. Basically, they lose some of the big names, and that doesn't help anything. The fact that the ECB already said that, the ECB already said that they plan for the 100 with full attendance to make a loss in the first year and possibly break even in the second. And they're trying to change terminology as well. Like, oh, we must call it this now. It's like, that is not what the sport is. They're coming out with these gimmicks. And you look at the sponsors, KP Snacks is a fast food company. And the kits are bloody hideous. And I hope it fails, but at the same time, I'm worried if it does fail because the amount of money and capital the ECB has invested in this gimmick, it will, I think, damage the game irreparably at a time when the game is already in crisis. And I love Test cricket. I love T20. I love everything about it. But unfortunately, the sport's been badly run by all the governing bodies for a long time. The Rugby League World Cup is planning to go ahead as planned. They've got 4 options on the table. 3 of them involve playing this year. One of them involves postponing it by 12 months, which is the last resort. Plan A is to have full capacity attendance. Plan B is to have reduced capacity attendance depending on location and what government guidelines state. Third choice is to play on time but with no fans in attendance. And the fourth option is to postpone by a year and hope the situation has improved massively, which I don't know. In India and Pakistan, it's actually field hockey is the number 1 sport. In India and Pakistan, it's not cricket. Number 1 sport is field hockey. Just putting it out there. Not even number 1 sport in the subcontinent, which you would think it would be. It's not. But yes, the Rugby League World Cup they're planning. The organisers have been very transparent. They intend to have the tournament take place on time. But the 4 options on the table is full attendance, partial attendance, no attendance, all played this year. That's ABC. Plan D is to play it next year if the situation requires, but they don't want to do that because they're going to clash with the Football World Cup in Qatar, which is what they want to avoid because of the TV rights, with BBC having all the games and agreeing to TV rights without full coverage. It hurts the image of the sport when the sport is screaming out for viewers and cash. So they're planning to have full attendance or at least play the tournament on time. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, this Indian variant is the concern. I'm waiting for my first jab. I should be eligible for my first jab in about a couple of weeks, I think, if that. My partner's got underlying health issues, so she's already had her first jab. Her second jab is in a couple of weeks. So we shall see what happens. Anyway, I've been going for over 2.5 hours now. I'm going to call that a stream. Thank you very much for all your questions. Obviously, there's discussed a lot. Obviously, Chelsea have made top 4 by virtue of Leicester losing. Leicester have still made Europe. Tottenham haven't got Europe at all. So the European places in English football have been settled. Lille has won the French league. Atletico have won the Spanish league. Inter have won the Italian league, and then, of course, Bayern Munich have won the German league. So the big 5 leagues are sorted. We've got 2 European Cup finals, and then it's just over 2.5 weeks till the Euros. The Euros kicks off on the 11th of June. So we'll see what happens. So thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate all the questions. If Tottenham got UEFA Conference, that's a joke. They will not enjoy that at all. But I don't believe they did. I generally don't believe they did. So we'll see what happens. But thank you very much for watching. Thanks for all your questions, and I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.